Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Today, we are talking Utah football. We've got our friend, Sammy Mora, who covers Utah Utes for 24/7 Sports. We'll be discussing what's going on with Utah, maybe some rumors here and there, some stuff in the media, just all things Utah football today. So appreciate Sammy giving us her time. Before we get started with that, and remember, everybody, continue to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff, and hit the comments as you guys always do, and hit the notification bell so you know exactly when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. First things first, Sammy, been a minute since I have talked to you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I think last time we talked was right before the Holy War, and already at that point things were not great in Salt Lake, but things went from not great to a whole lot worse in the last 4 weeks of the season. So I'm good. I think Utah fans are ready to. I know a lot of Utah fans are excited to get to see this team again. There's a lot of new faces and stuff, and I think it's good. It's going to be good. Fresh start, clean slate.
Absolutely.
What happened last year does not affect this year. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what this team does this year.
Well, and that's the thing, that a lot of people have said, a lot of people don't like, a lot of fans don't like the transfer portal and all that stuff. However, it's a good thing to keep in mind is just what you mentioned. You can have a bad season and you can turn it around the next season, the very next season, if you do things the right way. So I feel like Utah is one of those teams. I mean, I'll let the spoiler out of the bag, but I've said it several times. I think Utah is a bounce back team. They're one of my sleepers to make it to Arlington for the Big 12 championship this year for the program itself. I trust it. I trust what they did, but we can talk about that a little bit later. First off, you mentioned this as far as the fans are ready to move on and ready for this season to get started. Just kind of give me a breakdown of the overall program now. It's kind of the fresh start, moving on. How are the fans and, coaches, players, everybody feeling about the program right now?
I mean, there was a lot of overhaul both on the coaching staff and the roster after last season. Obviously, Andy Ludwig got let go of as the offensive coordinator. They brought in Jason Beck from New Mexico. Quinton Ganther stepped away, and he's now at UNLV. And they brought in Mark Atuai from Washington State. And then also Utah brought in Micah Simon, also from New Mexico, to take over as the wide receivers coach. So, lots of changes on the offensive staff, which, it was kind of needed at this point. There had been so much talk for basically every year since Andy Ludwig came back about how complex and difficult this Utah offense was to grasp. You would hear that it would take a year, sometimes two, for guys to start grasping it because it was quote unquote a pro style offense. And it reared its ugly head. It started rearing its ugly head in 2023 when all of the Utah had some injuries that took over the team, and so you had to play Bryson Barnes for a good majority of the season and stuff. And then it reared its ugly head again tenfold last season when Cam went down with at first the hand injury and then the ankle injury versus Arizona State. That this complex of an offense is not what Utah needs, especially now in the transfer portal era with, kids are coming and going every year. So I think getting Simon back and Atuai in the program was massive. It's fresh blood, it's fresh vibes, it's a new look on things. Defensively, entire coaching staff remained intact. You lost a couple pieces in the portal. Cam Calhoun and Keanu Tonavasa are probably the two biggest that you lost. But Utah brought in a lot of good talent on both sides of the ball, both in the winter window, and then they added some last-minute pieces in the spring window. But when I say that there was a complete overhaul of certain position rooms, I mean it was a complete overhaul of some position rooms. Utah lost every single running back in the room to either graduation or the portal. The only person that was technically a returner, and I even hate using that word, was Daniel Bray, who's a true freshman, who is a mid-semester enrollee. Quarterback room basically is a complete overhaul minus Isaac Wilson, who put his name in the portal and then withdrew it. The only room that stayed intact completely without a scholarship player leaving was the Utah offensive line. Massive for this Utah offensive line.
Yeah.
They lost a couple to graduation, but they were, lower on the depth chart and stuff like that. But all 5 of the returning starters from last year's team are back for the offensive line. And then Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker looking to be like a very, I don't want to say volatile as like a bad word, but like volatile as like a powerful running back quarterback combo. And I think, the little bit we did get to watch in spring, because we're only granted 20 minutes every Tuesday
Right.
for like 4 weeks and stuff, 4 or 5 weeks. Devin showed some very, 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 very good things. And, there's a lot of familiarity with him and Beck as he, was with Beck last year at New Mexico. So it wasn't like starting from square one with a whole new quarterback and a whole new system. They changed a couple things, they tweaked a couple things, but this is basically the offense that Devin ran at New Mexico. And so there's that familiarity. It was just getting everybody else around him, up to speed. New wide receiver room. Basically, you only bring back a couple of guys with not a lot of production, but you go into the portal and you pull in some very, very, very good pieces. There's not anyone who is a single 1,000-yard receiver that Utah brought in, but the way that I kind of look at this Utah offense is Utah's not going to need a 1,000-yard receiver to be successful. They have a very talented running back room. Devin is a very talented dual threat quarterback. And if each of the guys in the wide receiver room can produce a couple 100 yards a piece, I think, maybe you have someone in the 700 to 800-yard range by the end of the season. This team is still going to be successful, because if the offense is clicking, we know that this Utah defense is going to be fine. Utah's defenses for a long time have been, even last year, Utah's defense kept them in a lot of games that they shouldn't have been in, given the quarterback situation and the offensive situation last year. But, one thing is for certain, Morgan Scalley knows how to put a high-level defense on the field.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you look at the numbers, total defense, what were they, 29th, scoring defense, 25th. I mean, for a team, you look at that, and first of all, those are good numbers. But then you look at it compared to what the offensive output and what the offense was doing on a drive-by-drive basis. That's kind of the way I look at it. A lot of 3-and-outs by that offense. Defense out there a lot because the offense can't move the football. And for you to still be able to put up those type of numbers defensively says a lot. And with that, a lot of that coming back. But you did mention 2 people that were leaving. Now, I guess I could get into the potential tampering situation going on with BYU. I don't know that I need to go into that. But losing those pieces, but it seems like Utah does a really good job of replacing that type of talent versus some people you lose that, and then it's, oh, okay, well, you might have to do it by committee or anything like that. And maybe Utah's doing that. Kind of tell me and tell everybody, is Utah doing that, or is it, no, we've had people in place and we shouldn't miss a beat?
So, well, the two biggest positions that, a lot of fans have questions about for Utah this year are defensive tackle and corner. Right. And obviously, you lose Keanu Tanavasa to BYU, which, it is what it is and stuff. But Utah has always been the type of team, they like to go 4 deep on the defensive tackle, and they rotate bodies fairly frequently just to keep people fresh, get different types of bodies in there, different situations. That's always been Utah's MO. So while Keanu was playing like a bigger role for Utah, it's not like everything's gone. Aliki Viamahi comes back. He'll be the veteran in the room. He's been banged up throughout his career, so him staying healthy is going to be key. Dallas Vakalai really came on as a true freshman towards the back half of last season. We kind of project him out to be the starter opposite Aliki. Jonah Lea'ea, he's been in the program for 3 years now, and he has finally gotten up to like a great playing weight. He's been trying to get up there, and he's been fighting, and he's been doing it all the last 2 or 3 seasons that he's been at Utah. But, Morgan Scalley's been really high on him during the spring. And then that kind of leaves that 4th spot. And there's a couple of guys that have been fighting for it. It's probably there's a battle that's going to rage into fall camp for Utah. some names that we're hearing, Mike Tatuoli was a walk-on who was actually awarded a scholarship at the end of last spring due to like his performance and stuff. Carson Kafusi is a true freshman mid-semester enrollee. He's 6'6", came in at a great playing weight. He didn't play his entire senior year of high school. He had a lower leg injury that knocked him out. And then Utah also brought in Dylan Battle, who was a mid-semester enrollee at LSU, but he transferred to Utah this spring. So while he hasn't been at Utah, he does have that semester or that spring session under his belt. So he kind of has a familiarity of what a program is like. And there's a whole plethora of freshmen that are coming in for Utah. I think there's like 3 or 4 that are all could be contenders at some point for playing time. The 3 that are kind of set in stone for defensive tackle is Viamahi Vakalai and Leia Ea are the 3, and then that 4th one is going to be kind of up for grabs this fall, and it's going to be one of those battles that I know that I'm watching as fall progresses, even though we won't truly be watching much practice in fall.
Right.
So that's one that I'm going to be watching as the defensive tackle, and then corner. You keep Smith Snowden at nickel, which is massive. Scooby Davis is going to be back. Kyle Whittingham said he's kind of gotten a firm grasp on one of the starting jobs, which, him and Cam Calhoun played kind of shared time last year at corner after some injuries took over in that room as well. And so Scooby's probably going to take that next step, and he'll be starting at one corner. And then you have a 3-horse race for the other corner spot. You have a pair of transfers that came in this spring in Don Saunders, the Texas A&M transfer, Blake Cotton from UC Davis, and Rock Caldwell, who's actually a JUCO transfer. And all 3 of them, Sharif Shaw said, they've all had those strides that they needed to have this spring, but there's also, still some growing pains. They haven't been in this program for more than a couple of weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see how their development goes this summer. Cause this is the time when you have your player-led stuff. You're in the film room, you're working with the guys. I know most, if not all of the guys, actually, I'm pretty sure the entire team that was here for spring is back on campus now. So that's gonna be a fun battle to watch, as well as who that corner spot is. We had heard that one or 2 of those guys was starting to really pull away when spring ended. So we'll see if it's if they still are pulling away by the time that fall comes, because sometimes kids that were really hot in the spring are cold in the fall, and so It's going to be one of those things that you have to see where they're at. So honestly, if Sharif Shaw is one of those coaches that I am not worried about in terms of what he has and what the concerns that there is around this position group. Sharif has long been a guy who can not only recruit at a high level, but he can develop the crap out of kids. He has turned 2 star kids into NFL stars. He's found JUCO players and have turned them into NFL stars. Jalen Johnson and Clark Phillips were 2 of the highest rated recruits Utah's ever had. And they continuously got better under Sharif's tutelage during their times at Utah. So Sharif is not a coach that I, worry about in terms of getting the right guys on the field. And the same goes with Luther Ellis, who's Utah's defensive tackle coach. Utah has had a long lineage of amazing defensive tackles, himself included. So, I can understand when people are very concerned about a Utah offense, because when you think of Utah football, you don't think of offense first and foremost. You think of defense. So when it comes to concerns and stuff, I think defensive concerns, I don't weigh heavy into them, because just, Utah's history with the defensive players and positions and success. But offensively, I can understand there being some concerns. So, that's kind of where I think things are at.
And that's the thing with the defense. I think people are pretty comfortable, kind of like you are with the defense. It's just kind of the proof is in the pudding, and it's always been there. And you start talking about the offense, now you're bringing in a transfer. I mean, you mentioned it, and it's Devin Dampler. Very familiar with the offense. However, look, the last couple of seasons, it's been injuries that have derailed this thing to the quarterback position. What's it look like behind him? Look, I would assume that Isaac Wilson is a better backup clearly this year than last year, because he played so much last year. So I got to think that Utah fans got to feel a little bit better about it, and coaches feel better about it, because look, we're not going into this thing with a backup that, hasn't played. We don't know how good he even can be. got to feel good about this, even if the injury bug does hit again, that we've got somebody that, hey, he's got some experience, has played, and maybe we can get some things done. And the season doesn't have to be derailed like it has been definitely last year and to some extent the year before.
Well, first off, I'm going to say we're not manifesting those injury
No,
issues this year. Utah fans have broke out their sage. They're just like, no injuries. But it's funny because I think Utah's going to be good at the backup position, but if you ask fans don't believe the same. And the reason is one, it's a brand new system. And Isaac had some good moments this spring, but Isaac also had some not great moments this spring from our little media viewing sessions. And honestly, the QB2 battle, it's not set in stone at Utah. Like 100%, it is not set. Utah's 25 quarterback, Bird Ficklin, he was an early enrollee, so he was here for spring. Bird really, really, really started turning heads and really, really, really impressed the coaches coming down the stretch for spring football. He was one of the top players coming out of Oklahoma in the class of 2025. Basically, very kind of similar playing style as Devin Dampier. He's a lefty, so there's that you have to take into consideration. But he puts balls are in good places. He's smart with the football. He knows when to pull it and run. He's elusive. He is so hard to bring down. In a couple of the media sessions we had, you would see a defender crashing on him because he was live. Dampier was not. But Ficklin was live during spring, and you'd see the linebackers crashing in on him, and he just would whip out this bag of tricks, and he would be gone to the races, and he's hard to bring down. So I think that QB2 battle is far from over at Utah. I think, you bring up, Isaac has all of those, games and reps under his belt and stuff, but that was under the old offense. That's last year. This is this year. You need to make sure that he, can understand this offense, and it is very, very, very simpler compared to last year's offense and the Andy Ludwig style of game. But still, you're going to need to see consistency from Isaac. He's now a sophomore. He's had 7 or 8 games of playing experience. You're going to need to see the steps in the right direction to, feel comfortable with that. But also don't count out Bird. Bird is very, very, very talented. And honestly, I could see him being the future of this Utah program. If Devin has a killer season and decides to go to the NFL, I think honestly Bird could be the guy after Devin. They're cut from the same cloth, in terms of playing style and everything. So QB2 is it's far from settled. It is far from settled at this point.
Absolutely. So I mentioned at the top of this, and I've said it, throughout the offseason, that I think Utah is, I think they're poised to have a bounce back year. And like I said, they're one of my sleepers to get to Arlington to play for a Big 12 title. Having said that, though, Sammy, you look at their schedule. If they're going to make it to Arlington, they're going to have earned it. And here's the thing, last year, we thought, right out of the gate, the Big 12 play, they played Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, it turned out that both teams who we thought were going to be the best 2 teams in the conference, or at least up there, turned out to not be. Oklahoma State was actually the worst team in the conference. I'm not sure that's going to be the case this year. Look, right out of the gate, they play Texas Tech. It's at home, but Texas Tech is being picked by many, many people to win the Big 12, at least be at Arlington for the Big 12, for everything that they did in the offseason in the transfer portal. So you look at their first 4 conference games. I mean, at UCLA, Cal Poly, and Wyoming, I'm going to give them that. Even though the game at Wyoming could get tricky, can be tricky, Utah's just more talented than they are. Mm-hmm. But then you get into the Big 12. Tech, at West Virginia, Arizona State, and at BYU. Now, here's the thing. At West Virginia, look, they're basically a brand new roster, brand new staff, but it's still in Morgantown, which is not an easy place to go play football. Having said that, those first 4 games, we're going to know a lot about Utah right off the bat. And then you look at the last 3 games. And I'm not trying to shortchange anybody in between, but the last 3 at Baylor, Kansas State, and at Kansas, who Kansas Who knows what they'll be by that time of the year, but I think they're going to have to be another team that's going to be a bounce back team. It's not an easy schedule for Utah. Not an easy one at all, Sammy. Like I said, if they're going to make it to Arlington, they are going to have earned this thing.
Yeah, and the funny thing you say about West Virginia is Utah's very familiar with Rich Rodriguez from back in the Pac-12 days when Arizona and Utah would play annually. Rich Rod was a thorn in Utah, or Rich Rod specifically was a thorn in Utah's side during those Arizona Utah years, like when he was there. So despite it being like a brand new team and stuff, I think Utah does come. I did a sweeping projection of how many games I think Utah would win, and I put them at 9-3. My board was like, no, the floor is 10-2, and I said, good on you guys, because I see it being 9-3. And the three teams I have, possibly circled is Texas Tech, Arizona State, and Kansas State. Those are the three games that I think are possible losses for Utah. And people are probably like, what, you really think Utah's going to beat BYU? It's like, it's this rivalry game is so hard to predict, but I know that this Utah team is sick of losing to BYU, and they've only lost to BYU, like, I think a couple of times, like less than one hand. I can count how many times they've lost to BYU in the last, actually, in, I don't want to say my lifetime, but like kind of in my lifetime. But those rivalry games are never gimmies. Like Utah could have won last season. Utah could have beaten BYU last season if they would have gotten one final stop. So I think that, that game is always unpredictable. And while it is down in Provo, I think Utah has a fighting chance for it. And, Tech is going to be, that Tech game is something that I'm really excited for, having them at Rice Eccles to open the Big 12 slate. It's going to be fun. Arizona State, I think, is one of those teams, for me at least, that like I'm very curious to see how they are this year. Obviously they bring back a good amount of pieces. They added some stuff in the portal, but Scadaboo was just so good. And he did so much for that team. So it's going to be interesting to see like how, are they at the same level that they were, with him? And then Kansas State is just one of those teams that I think, on paper, they look really good. And so I think that that's something that my board was all like, you have Utah losing 3 of their 3 games at home. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. And I said, I mean, I get that. But if you look, to be completely honest, I was just looking at the schedule. I was not looking home or away for most of them. Right. I was like, hey, let's just look at these teams. And then if I thought it was close enough, then I'm factoring in the home field advantage or the away game. But, it's going to be a hard fought schedule for Utah this year. And I think if Utah can stay healthy down the stretch, if Utah minor injuries, nothing season ending that's going to derail everything, pulling out the sage again and just waving it around the facility. I think that this team, they're going to be competitive. They're going to stay in a lot of games. This offense is going to, they're going to be good. This offense is good. This defense is good. I think that this is a very well-balanced Utah team this year. And so it's like, it's a lot. This schedule is probably one of the more daunting ones that I've seen for, the last couple of years for Utah, especially like going back to the Pac-12 days. There were a couple of schedules that were absolutely gnarly. Like there was, I can't remember what season it was, but they had like a stretch that was like Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, like 4 weeks in a row. So again, if any coach is ready for a gauntlet of a schedule, it's Kyle. He's been through it before. He'll get these guys in shape and they'll be ready to go. So if Utah can stay healthy, they'll be competitive in almost every single game this season, I think.
Gotcha. Well, and that brings me, before I get you out of here, Kyle Whittingham, been there a long time. Successors already in place. There was some talk, I guess rumors more like it, maybe not necessarily real talk, about last year may have been his last year. And then more, again, rumors. Well, he's coming back this year just to try to get, to leave on a winning note. Any chance that this actually is his last year at Utah? Or is it, he's going to be here for a few more as long as he's feeling good? Is he going to be here?
Sorry. Oh, you froze. Sorry. I was like, where did everything go? Honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, I wish I had a crystal ball because I could just like look forward and just like have all the answers. But he does have an amended contract now that states that he has to have in writing by, I think, if Utah makes it to the Big 12 championship, it's like after the Big 12 championship game. But if they don't make the Big 12 championship game, it's before that date, in writing, if he is staying or if he is leaving. And so
Gotcha.
it's going to be one of those things again that, we're not going to know. And Kyle's not going to be the type of guy who, he doesn't want a farewell tour. It's going to be very Saban-esque in terms of just a random Tuesday. He's going to be like, okay, we're having a press conference and I'm sailing off into the sunset type thing. And so I think, that's one of those I wish I had an answer for. I've heard things that, kind of point either way. And so I think a lot of it depends on how the season goes.
Sure.
If Utah makes it to the Big 12 championship and possibly the playoffs, then I could totally see him being like, okay, going out on a high note and I'm leaving, because he's always wanted to get this team to the playoffs and get them into that right position. But then again, at the same time, I could also see him being like, oh, we made the playoffs and getting that taste of success again and wanting to stay. So I so wish I knew the answer to. It would make my life a whole lot easier. But it's again, I could see it going either way. But he has a new amended contract that does say that he has to have in writing whether he'll be staying or going by a certain date. So
Gotcha.
If we don't know, at least the athletic department will know. I'll know as soon as I get an email that says, hey, we're having a press conference with Kyle in early to late December. So, or if it is a playoff run, it won't happen until whenever after they get eliminated. So, I wish I knew the answer, but until then I'm just kind of like the rest of you, where it's like it could go either way. So.
Nope, totally understand. Well, Sammy, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to jump on with this, kind of give us a little spot check here on Utah football. Tell everybody here where they can find you and all the stuff that you do. You
can find me on Twitter, or I still call it Twitter. I know people call it X. I still call it Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at S_Mora, MORA 247. I'm the managing editor over at utezone.com. Not in a biased opinion, probably one of the best places for Utah fans in the internet. Lots of fun stuff from us over there. It's heavy recruiting month for Utah right now. So we have tons and tons and tons and tons of VIP recruiting content going up on the daily. We have our own podcast over on the Ute Zone site called In the Zone, which you can get more information about what's going on Utah on the Hill. Actually, I should just say on the Hill, because it's not just a football podcast. We do basketball, gymnastics, everything. And then you can follow us on Twitter at utezone.com, or not utezone.com, just Utezone. Just Utezone on Twitter for more information about, the happenings of the Utah athletics department.
All right. Well, thank you, Sammy. I really appreciate you giving us your time today. And thank everybody again for watching. We appreciate you guys. Remember, go follow Sammy if you're a Utah fan, or if you are a Big 12 fan in general. Remember to follow and like everything here at Big 12 Insiders. We appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.